Thank you, Alex, for such a nice introduction. So, as Alex already mentioned, I am Bindya Chalana and I'm an international student at Carleton University. So, right now I'm in my third year of PhD, so slowly going close to the finishing of this. So, I'm working with Dr. Simon Wheel on the Nexo collaboration. So basically, I'm working on two different projects in my PhD, which are both super super interesting. One is on the light detection system, another is in the high voltage system. So it's like super crazy experiments going on. And the one thing I would like to actually draw the why I choose Carleton and especially Canada for doing my PhD was like when I was close to finishing my master's, I was looking for a for like I was like going a tour, like we should say looking over the what projects are going on because I come from a different background. Like I did my master's in material science, but during the masters, while in looking at the courses of physics, particle physics, I want to continue with the particle physics with my research. And then I discussed with the supervisor and other teachers and advisors all over the like. I remember when I was applying for here, I talked with the US people, like the advisors from the US and Australia and India as well. And then I found that in neutrino physics, the Canadian universities are doing really, really good, and their collaboration, as well as their acceptance rate is really good. They accept the international students with like very open arms, and that was like one main factor when I thought of doing a PhD in an international like university because it's a big deal to come out of a like when you're an international student and you want to go out abroad so like far away for such a long time. You just need to look many factors while choosing a institution where you're going to do such long degree. So then I remember like talking to Simon was the most like one of the fascinating supervisor I come across with, and he like I was always like wanted to become part of experimental physics like, and then I found that little Lolex experiment is going on in his lab as well as the high voltage. So then that was the time when I actually thought that I should be going in Carleton for my PhD. So yeah, and believe me, I didn't regret one day. Although PhD is definitely very, very tiring experience. Like you just like some days are like totally you feel like, oh my God, where I have been stuck in. It's just so tiring. It's just like nothing is coming out. Some days are like super bad. But in the end, when you just like doing when you're following your passion and of research, like you have been like dreaming of doing this from so long, it's just like so good. You just like yeah, that was the only I guess I can say the motivation behind me joining the PhD or such a long degree. I remember like my mom says, "Oh, why are you going for a 4 year degree?" And I was like, I want to do this." Like you just like look at the people talk around you who have been doing so great in their fields that just like motivate you. So yeah, that was my main motivation behind coming for such a big degree. Yeah.
I'm from. So I'm from Mauritius. It's the literal land of the dodo. Yeah, the like dodos are from Mauritius, but it's a super tiny island east of South Africa, and yeah, it's great for snorkeling and scuba diving and all these wonderful activities. I spent a considerable amount of time doing that, and in fact, if I hadn't been a physicist, I would probably have been as either a scuba diving instructor or somebody working in marine biology, preferably marine biology. But yeah, so I did my undergraduate in Vancouver, and then I moved to Europe for my master's. It was in Europe. The nice thing is you have these joint master's programs. So I spent a year in France and a year in Switzerland, and then I moved here to here being Queens, sorry, um, for my PhD. One of the big factors really in my decision was the fact that what I was looking for PhDs, like I applied to like 15 schools, I think, something like that, a lot of places. But um, I saw Joe's ad on InspireHack, like that's the website for high energy physics, and shot him an email and he responded within like 2 hours and then said, oh, let's Skype. And I spoke with him. Like he responded in such a detailed way that I was like, okay, this person put in a lot of effort and actually explained to me what his research was, what things he was open to and stuff like that. So I saw a really good opportunity. And then as soon as I called him, like we got a really good rapport. It was very clear to me that he would, push projects, but also encourage me to take on my, to think for myself and push on my own projects. So that was really encouraging. And I think my key decision was the key in my decision was basically just the rapport that I felt I had with Joe, and it was instant. And yeah, for research, so I'm part of the high energy theory / astroparticle theory group at Queen's University. So in the past, what I've worked on is using gas clouds uh, to constrain dark matter models. So to identify its properties through its heating effect on clouds of gas that are far out in the galaxy. I've also done some work on gravitational waves from dark matter sources and a bunch of similar things. So yeah, my interests are basically in various ways of building models for dark matter and testing for their presence in new and creative ways. And yeah, that's it.
And just remind us, Hamid, you're nearing the end because I believe you were applying for postdocs.
Yeah, I actually have news on that. I'm actually going to graduate in this. Yeah, I got a postdoc. I'll be starting a postdoc in Colorado State University.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, congratulations already. You'll have to let us know when the virtual party is so we can celebrate with you.
Yeah, that's, yeah, it's going to be a bit sad to leave Kingston, and I hope I get to meet people. Like, hopefully things calm down and we could at least have an outdoor meeting before.
So congrats, Amit, for the for the new postdoc. So hello everyone. My name is Matteo and I come from Italy. I am a third-year PhD student at McGill University in theoretical energy physics, working with Jean Klein, and basically I work on an intersection between particle physics, cosmology, and astrophysics, and mainly in dark matter phenomenology, so very similar to Amit. But what I'm really interested in is to test different dark matter properties and to see what are the implications on the cosmological and galactic level. So in order to do that, I run cosmological simulations for different dark matter models and try to see what are the impacts on galaxies, so our Milky Way, because we have a lot of experiments and a lot of data about our own galaxy, and also what are the implications on the CMB and the cosmological level. In order to, at least besides dark matter, I'm also interested in models of inflation, baryogenesis, and neutrino mass generation. So I'm interested in really a broad field of theoretical particle and astroparticle physics. Before joining Canada, I did both my bachelor and master degree in Italy and the University of Trento, where I worked after my master in some experimental particle groups for almost 2 years. Especially, I worked at CERN, working with the Atlas collaboration, in the searches of Higgs boson decays into bottom quark pairs, which is one of the most important signals to study the Higgs physics. And then I worked on a small experiment, which is called on the high energy particle detector on the Chinese seismo electromagnetic satellite. Which is a small satellite that tries to study the time correlations of the perturbation of the Van Allen belts and the occurrence of 5 magnitude earthquakes on Earth. So it was quite interesting, even though I'm more in the theoretical side, but also really interested in experimental physics, because I guess a theoretician, it's a good theoretician is also a person that is that has a good knowledge in experimental physics, in order to get a fruitful interaction between experimentalists and also to understand the limitations that an experiment has. So after my master, I applied for several PhD positions abroad, especially in US, Canada, and Europe. And I was, at the end, I decided to come. I was accepted in several positions, but then I decided to come to Canada because of the interaction with my future supervisor, who is Jean Klein. As Amit said, I sent around a lot of emails to professors in order to test if they have openings, if they had openings in their group. And Jim was extremely fast in replying. I guess in less than 30 minutes, he replied to my email, and he was really happy to chat and to meet me, to Skype me while I was at CERN. And so I have a really good relationship with my supervisor. I can say that it's more like a friend and a collaborator than like a real supervisor. He gives me a lot of freedom in my research, but he pushed me also. He guides me in all the steps that research and the PhD overall is about. I don't know, maybe besides that, yeah, I guess it's enough.
Well, for now, trust me, we'll ask you again. Thank you so much, Matteo. That is a wonderful experience. And my goodness, what a breadth of experience that you've had in experiments all around the world already. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I was lucky because I did my master's degree in theoretical physics, but with an experimentalist. And so he strongly supported some internship that I did at the beginning in Sweden. And then he offered me a position after my master degree, like as a research collaborator in his group during the buffering time between the end of my master and the beginning of my PhD. So yeah, I was also lucky.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel. Actually now I'm a third-year PhD student. Have to think about that for a second. At the University of Alberta, and I work for Professor Marie-Cécile Perreault. My field, I guess you would say, is astroparticle physics, specifically on the experimental side for dark matter experiments. Right now, I work on the NEWS-G and SVC experiments, but I got started with my undergrad here at the U of A. I actually was lucky to sort of get into this field right away. Started doing summer research after my first year of undergrad. Then I did my master's at Queen's on the same NEWS-G experiments, and then came back here to the U of A, which was a really sort of lucky move for me, because while I was living in Ontario, my fiance was accepted into medical school at the University of Calgary. So I knew I wanted to apply to somewhere close. So I kind of just did things sort of backwards, I guess, and picked the school. And I also wanted to keep working on the same research project, and then sort of found the professor last. And Marie-Cécile was very gracious and willing to take me on and let me sort of continue my master's work on NEWS-G, and gave me a very nice spot here. But yeah, so I work on direct detection dark matter experiments, both the NEWS-G and scintillating bubble chamber projects. Both of those sort of focus on looking for low mass dark matter, sort of on the scale of the mass of a proton or less. And it's been a lot of fun. Sort of the reason I guess I'm a little delayed in doing like my comprehensive exam and things like that is because I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time in France over the last couple of years, actually working on setting up our detector there. There's an underground lab right on the border with Italy. So it's a beautiful area that I got to spend a lot of time at. But now, on lockdown this year, I haven't been moving around so much, of course. I've been mostly working on data analysis and the statistical analysis for these experiments. Yeah.
That's a very full 3 years. You've been doing a lot, which is pretty fantastic. So when you were in, may I ask how long you were in France during that work?
Cumulatively, I was probably there for about 4 or 5 months in total, sort of stretched out over the course of a year or so.
Oh, amazing. And may I ask again, was that part of an exchange or just a connection that was made earlier?
Not an actual exchange program or anything like that. It's just that our experiment, of course, has to go in one of these underground labs. That one was selected sort of for the initial phase of our experiment. If you're familiar with it, it's the Laboratoire Souterrain de Modane. It's under the Alps, right on the border with Italy. Yeah, they just needed boots on the ground to help set up the experiment and start taking commissioning data and things like that. So I was very lucky to be there.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. Thank you to all of our panelists for your very awesome introductions. I think we all know a little bit more about you, your research, and maybe your initial reach out to finding your PhD pathways. I'm also hearing that you've got some great supervisors who are really responsive to emails. And so that's also, I like hearing that there's pathways to connection, even when we're distant from those potential people. If you're emailing them from another country or giving them a call, that's always a great first point if you haven't met them already. What are you thinking about, Amit? What do you want to contribute?
So I actually so if I don't forget, so I don't forget, actually emails one way, but one thing I've been noticing like happening more and more is people posting ads on the Twitterverse. So I'm not on it because I don't like arguing with people endlessly, but no, I mean, even though you're not on Twitter, you can like, it's like, yeah, I've noticed more and more ads, like professors sort of tweeting out ads. So and then things getting retweeted. So it's actually, for smaller places where, it might get, you might not have this on your radar. So it's actually a great place to also search for like PhD positions, postdoc positions, and stuff like that.
That's a really good suggestion. Yeah. So social media, I know the McDonald Institute, we often have a career web page that professors are invited to give us job postings when they have them come available. From our panelists, any other suggestions of where folks could look for supervisors who are looking to host PhD students?
Looking at my personal experience, I just selected the professor that I wanted to contact and I just emailed them without and asking if they have openings in their group.
That is also a great approach.
It was quite randomly. Yeah, it was quite random.
No.
Also because I don't know, but the applications for PhD, can be expensive, at least if you apply to like 20, 30 positions, especially in US or Canada, and you have to file all the original files and everything, it could be quite expensive. Mm-hmm. So also to narrow the choice, it's a good way to send out email and check before applying.
I think that's good market research, a great suggestion. Anyone else on the panel? Suggestions? India.
Yeah, I agree with what he said. Like more like when I applied, I used the email, but I think now when you get involved with or get in the field, then the other sources, like as Amit mentioned about the Twitter or the other email address, or just like people share the positions from the other collaboration or other. You just get more information when you are in the field. But I think the sending out the email to the people you're interested with is, I guess, most effective. Like at least it was the most effective for me to start with.
And you had mentioned before, Bindia, you actually came from a material science background, which is, I mean, absolutely does also touch on physics for sure, but not necessarily coming from physics pure, right? So.
Yeah, actually it was material science. Like basically I worked on the batteries and all the materials for the battery electrolytes. But then during my master's, I just came up with the course in elementary particle physics, which I was totally interested in and I want to continue. And then I talked with the professor and he guided me along with which fields and sent out me some papers and the fields, which of course the particle physics is not a narrow field. There is a lot in that as well. So then definitely I want to go with something experimental. So then I continue looking for what other different projects are going on and what I could be interested in to go further in. Mm-hmm. And this is how I actually decided to switch my field from material science to particle. Yeah, it was actually, I would like to just mention that when I started PhD, it was bit difficult to cope up because you definitely have no experience what you have just started. Because if you have already done the master's or an undergrad project in particle physics or whatever, you're continuing with the PhD, then it becomes more easy to continue the flow. But when you start something really new, it takes time, but you have to just keep going. And yeah.
I think that's very good advice. Thank you, Bindia. If I will ask another question, but I'm going to also open it up to the rest of the participants. You've been very quiet and patient, but I would very much like to hear from members of our audience too for questions. And I'm going to rely on Jennifer and Max to let me know if there's any hands raised. But before, because I don't see any in the chat just yet, I am curious if you would tell us one thing that you would tell your past self now, having been at the stage, having, you're at the stage that you're at, either in your third year or beyond. If you had to give yourself advice on your first day of your PhD, what would you tell yourself? Anyone is welcome to unmute on the panel as they think about this great advice.
I can just speak, but I don't have any advice, because I usually live day by day, and I don't like regret all the choices that I made. It was just my choice at the time, so I don't like say, okay, if I could change something in my past, I would. So, and also I'm really optimistic and positive in all situations. So maybe exactly, it's strange compared to the other.
Can I clarify then? Because when I would say less about regret, and I would say, what is a tip? What is something that, if you'd known day one, something might be a little bit different today, whether it was, joining a club or getting involved in something, or.
Oh, okay. Got to the question. Yeah, I have a tip, but it's the same what I did. Since I was an international student and I didn't know basically anyone here at the beginning, I played volleyball since I was a kid, so I joined the volleyball team of the university. And it was a good place where you can meet new people, also not belonging to the physics community, which can be sometimes boring. Because if you know just colleagues, you just talk about physics mainly, which is great, but also you need something else. So that was what I did, but also McGill offered orientation week before the start of the lectures, where you could meet international students from different departments, and they organized plays and other activities in order to know more people. I guess it was extremely helpful.
I think that's wonderful advice, Matteo. You've highlighted great points where, your graduate experience, your PhD experience is more than your research. It's more than your studies. It's your opportunity to connect across campus with different people with different ideas, and to really enjoy some of your leisure too. That's awesome that you joined the volleyball team. Any championships we should know about?
No.
Okay, not yet. Okay.
No, also because it's quite weird, because McGill doesn't have a varsity team for the McGill volleyball. It does have just for the female side, but yeah, no, we didn't win. But it was really nice, at least, to meet people from different age. Yeah, it was really, really nice.
That's super. What about our other panelists? Your reflection to your past self.
So yeah, I think this may be quite specific to people who are in your PhD or feel like you want to stay in academia and go on to do postdocs and stuff. I would say take every opportunity to get to network. So that means going to conferences, looking at the archive, and if you see something interesting, don't be afraid to email people. People love talking about their research or emailing them. Because applying for even if you're a master's student applying for PhD, or PhD applying for postdoc, or I guess even as an undergrad, I mean, you never know where opportunities are going to come from. So just emailing somebody, fire up an email, just say, hey, I've seen this is interesting. Do you have any open positions, or I'll be your free labor. Can you give me something to work on? I mean, I know friends who did that as undergrad, so it's great for getting experience. It's great for getting breadth of experience. And also, I mean, when you're getting hired, as my supervisor likes to say, we're not homo physicus, we are humans with biases and stuff. So it's much easier to get it. If you've networked and, the group there who's hiring you knows you and stuff, it's much easier to get a position versus if, you're just a name on a file. So that actually does help quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, even if you're undergraduate, it's great to just fire up an email. Yeah, it's a 10-to-1 ratio. I mean, you send 10 emails, you get 1 response, but one response can turn into a position. So it's worth doing, and you get great learning experience out of it. That's the most important thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Amit. Daniel, you had your hand raised and then politely put it down. I invite you to speak again, please.
For sure. Yeah, I think my tip to my past self would be to think carefully about the courses you take for your PhD, maybe outside the box a little bit. because, you know, your PhD, you probably are not going to have many courses to take. Here at the U of A, it's only 2 courses. And these will be sort of your last opportunities to be in a classroom environment, which, you know, you might not miss right now, but that's sort of, you know, the last time you'll be working on problems that someone knows the answer to. And the last time you'll get, you know, sort of structured, you know, education on things that could be really important for your research. So of course, you know, there's lots of sort of classical physics courses that everyone ends up taking, but I was actually really lucky to just sort of stumble into finding a statistical analysis course actually offered by UBC that I took remotely. So even though it was a bit of a stretch and I was lucky to find it, it's now, you know, that's basically 90% of my job now. And the U of A doesn't have a course like that. So I think, you know, especially with a network like the McDonald Institute, even finding connections at other schools to find really helpful courses for your research is worth the effort.
That's a very, 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 very good advice, Daniel. Thank you so much for that. And also a good point too, knowing that different universities will have different course requirements. And so doing that research maybe before you apply of what courses are available, or talking with your supervisor about what courses you should be taking, is always a good idea too. All right. We have a question from the audience, but one that was asked through our hosts. And so I'm going to read it out loud. What is or was your biggest hurdle in entering the PhD program? What was the hurdle that you faced? Daniel, you're unmuted, so I'm going to put you on the spot, or you were. Last to speak, first to speak?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, like I was saying, sort of the biggest hurdle probably was actually just sort of finding and creating this position here that I sort of wanted. So yeah, I had a two-body problem, I guess you could call it, in the physics world, which is always super difficult for grad school. So yeah, just finding a position at the school I wanted, and then on top of that, with the experiment I wanted, was a little bit difficult. And I was super lucky to find my supervisor in that way. But you know, issues around things like that in general, I would say, is probably a big hurdle that everyone, you know, you might face a lot of anxiety about and things.
Sure, and I will just jump in because there's a directed question to you, Daniel. Was the course by Scott Ozer?
Yes.
Aha.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. Good guess from our audience member. Well done.
Really good course. Highly recommended.
Awesome. To our other panelists, what was your hurdle?
I guess mine was that I guess I wasn't proactive enough, sort of, you know, doing those things like writing emails and stuff like that. It honestly really helps. So if you're thinking of starting, you know, applying at least 6 months before, like, I mean, fire up emails, like, you never know, you can get a reply. I didn't do that a lot. And so, you know, that I think sort of was a bit of a hurdle then. Yeah, that's
great. Thank you. India or Mateo, do you have any reflections on your biggest hurdle getting into grad school?
I think the one I remember exactly is the funding. Like, yeah, so I remember, like, I applied for the PhD in three different universities, and I got selected on all 3. But first 2 I need to drop because I was like, being an international student, they just like the availability of funding is a bit limited. So I think that was the one big hurdle, because like all projects were really good and one part with, but yeah, sometimes like the funding could be one of the restriction or a hurdle to overcome when you go for for the PhD, because like I'm not sure about how the domestic students how easy for them it is, but for international students it could be a challenge to find a full, because there is a difference in the fees as well. So you have to think a lot about this. So for me, the funding was one of the hurdle that I was really getting out of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. For any of our colleagues that are on the call with us that are not yet in grad school, when I talk to undergrads, I also realize that they don't all recognize that, of course, you pay tuition as a graduate student, international or domestic, but you do have funding usually from your supervisor to support you on a particular project. So you are either, sometimes you're hired as a research assistant, sometimes you're also paid through, in Canada, it's the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council, or NSERC. But if you're like us at the McDonald Institute, we have funding from the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, which is what we have developed in order to fund the students here at the Institute. And Jennifer, do you want to plug the HQP 7 that's happening this Friday?
Yeah, so right now we do have a competition open, which will be closing on Friday afternoon, where a supervisor can apply with an identified graduate student and put an application in to help support them. So if you're stuck on some funding, that's one way we can help out. There's also opportunities for undergraduate students to apply. They don't need to be identified in this situation, but so a project will be identified in advance. So if you're looking for something, or your supervisor perhaps would like to, they can always contact us directly. And I see Emmett has a question, and then after that, we do have a question in the chat that maybe.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry, I was like just saying, plugging Queen's actually. Starting in September, Queen's international students will pay the same fees as locals. Yeah,
that was announced at 1 o'clock today.
Yeah.
So future incoming PhDs coming to Queen's will pay the same rate as domestic students.
Yeah, this is in Carleton as well now from this year, but like first 2 years were like you have to grab a scholarship to get, yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that that's changing at other universities too. That's phenomenal. We'll have to get that.
Yeah, instead of McGill, it has been like they changed that in 2010 or something. So I just pay like a domestic student.
Excellent.
So yeah.
Oh wow!
But I want to just complete the thought by Bindia that exactly the main problem, especially for international students, are the fundings. It's not just in Canada but everywhere. So that was a really good point.
Are there any other barriers, or may I move on to another question? I think you've all raised really important ones. So, okay, Kira. You've asked an excellent question. Would you like me to read it, or do you want to read it? Or say it out loud.
I can say it, sure.
Thank you. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
No problem. I was just wondering, how did you know that you would enjoy the research project you took on?
I can start to reply. So in my case, I didn't have a project when I came in. I came to McGill. So we decided the research project within the first year of my PhD. And basically it's up to you. So it's just a discussion between you and your supervisor, at least I'm talking just my personal experience. So there are some PhD positions that instead they have a proper title for your PhD project and you apply for that. But at least in my case, no, we decided the project within the first year. Also the second year is something that you can still change also that you didn't say your second year PhD if you don't like it. Yeah, as far as I got is that your supervisor, at least mine, really wants you to be yourself and just follow your dreams. It doesn't push you to do something that he wants to do, but it tries like to give you the independence. So.
Yeah.
But it's just my personal experience, of course, that could be different.
Go for it, Amit.
Okay, yeah, so my experience was somewhat similar. My supervisor, okay, first of all, this is slightly different if you're doing theory versus experiment, right? Because theory, your resources are pencil and paper. With experiments, your resources are equipment worth millions of dollars. So, well, not necessarily millions, maybe hundreds of thousands. But yeah, so it varies slightly. Maybe the experimentalist can chime in after experiments. So this is specifically for theory. What I did have was my supervisor gave me a lot of projects and sort of, what I did find work for me was like sort of starting to look at, read up on these things individually and then finding one thing that I'm interested in and diving more into detail on that. So initially, my supervisor gave me this put me in this gas clouds project. I was also in another project to use neutron stars to place bounds on dark matter. So look to test dark matter using neutron stars. And there was another one about, gravitational corrections to dark matter in these neutron star systems still. Eventually, I ended up doing more on the gas clouds thing. other PhD students ended up doing the neutron star project more. So like, yeah, it's not always, like, you know, not all supervisors would do this, I would tend to think. But this is, again, my very personal opinion, but you should avoid places where you get hired to do, like, you know, to work on one specific project, and you have, you know, you like for 3 years you'll be working on this one specific thing, because it is far more interesting to work on sort of a breadth of thing, and then, you know, and then narrow your focus from there.
Well, good advice. What else do we have from our panelists?
Maybe I can address that more from sort of an experimental project side of things. So for sure, you know, in particle physics, like in the McDonald Institute, a lot of the experimental groups are these large collaborations that work on these experiments. So if you join one of those, you're, you know, maybe a little bit more constrained starting your, you know, starting your project. But even within each of those collaborations, there's so many different types of things you can work on, right? So in our group, we have people working on electronics. We have some material science sort of stuff going on, testing different stuff like that. There's lots of hardware work. There's the analysis side of things, both, you know, statistics and also the computing side of things. We have people working on machine learning stuff. So within that project, there's lots of different things you can do that you could, you know, sort of fine tune your interest. And sort of building on what Matteo said, like, I think it's a fairly, you know, recognized fact amongst supervisors that you will be more productive if you're happy with what you're working on. So your supervisor definitely has a vested interest in making sure that you're happy with what you're doing. So if you find yourself unhappy with what you're working on, it's totally okay to let your supervisor know and change course a little bit. That's a good thing.
What I'm hearing out of all of you is communication with your supervisor is a key thing. So excellent. Any follow-up, Kira, that you like, or is that good?
No, that's good. Thank you. It's very reassuring as an undergraduate looking into graduate studies. So thank you.
Awesome. That's great. We do have, there's another message that was sent to me with a different question. So I'm going to ask that. And then I also see Hussein has a question for Bindya, and I will move to that one next. But one of our participants asks, with many COVID you know, precautions and elements overtaking our lives and accessibility to labs being limited, besides the research that you're doing that may be disrupted right now, and writing articles, what else are you doing or could you be doing with your research? So I guess the first part of the question is, have you experienced disruptions, which I'm sure you have in some form or another? And if you're unable to access your experiments right now, what are you doing in the meantime?
I can just talk from the theory side. I can talk about the experimental side because I was substantially unaffected by the COVID. The only difference was that I couldn't go to the office anymore, which is something that everyone had to face. Surprisingly, I found an increase in my productivity, especially in the first few months of lockdown. But then, especially close to the winter holidays, my productivity went down. Well, I guess it was a bit normal because also the situation, the possibility not to go back to my family for the holidays, but I wasn't affected enough. So especially from the theory side, exactly, you just need a sheet of paper, a computer, and that's all.
That makes sense for sure. Anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit about that. So of course, yeah, this has been quite a disruption to the in-lab activity side of things. But honestly, you know, after the first sort of initial phase of the pandemic, things have actually been proceeding not too slowly. And I think the reason for that is that experimental work, you know, for every, you know, 1 hour you actually spend in the lab doing something in the lab, you spend 5 hours sort of doing preparation work, like researching what sort of equipment you have to buy, planning out the experiment, working on safety protocols for all the stuff you'll be doing. So all of that work can be done at home for the most part. So I think, you know, even with limited access to the lab, like, you know, limited time and limited number of people who can go in, as long as you sort of prepare as much as you can in advance and try and work efficiently in that way, you can actually still kind of get your experiment done. And I think most, a lot of sites around the country right now are in some sort of partial state of opening. So like even our experiments, right before the pandemic, we were getting ready to install our experiment at Snow Lab in Ontario. My flight to Sudbury to train for that was like the last thing I did before the pandemic. So even though I can't go there to work on it in person, we do actually have people in Sudbury who are installing it right now. So things can keep going.
If I'm not mistaken, we actually just released a time lapse of that experiment being installed in our latest newsletter, which looks pretty cool.
Yeah. The installation actually went really smoothly, due in large part to all the preparation we did in advance. Like we had a plan for installing every part of the experiment, so it kind of went like clockwork.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, thank you for putting in the link to that in the newsletter. And Daniel, that was a really good point to bring up as well. Any of our other panelists want to share life with disruptions and how you've been keeping well and keeping productive?
I think I agree with Daniel, as I also work mostly in lab. Few big, like the beginning, a few initial months were really like totally at home and you do nothing have to do in the lab, but you have other stuff to do. Even if you are just doing work in the experiment, it's not that just you are doing everything in the lab and you have nothing to do at home. You have plenty of other stuff to finish, right? As I agree, like sorting out what equipment need to buy, or planning out, or maybe some new stuff you're planning to install. You just like preparing for that, and analysis and all that stuff goes on. And I guess after summer, although we have limited, but we like two graduate students were going to the lab, and definitely we see a lot of increased efficiency working in the lab, because you have limited time and limited people going in, just like go in and finish us that task. Yeah, so I think things were not that bad reaching the last few months. Like, although the beginning was totally cut off, like you can have nothing to do in the lab, but later on the things were better, and yeah.
And I hope that they continue to improve. Right?
Yeah.
It's all back to work. I appreciate all of your comments on this. If I may add one more thought to the conversation, I know a number of students have been organizing new committees and groups at their universities. I can draw an example from Queen's, where there's a group of students who created the first gender minority committee or gender minority group in physics with sponsorship from their department. There's also opportunities to get involved in education and outreach. We also have an astroparticle physics blog. So if you feel idle, or if you're looking to get into service work as a part of your degrees, there's also opportunities at the Institute too to get up and involved. One of the questions actually from our audience members is actually directed at you, Bindia. So I am going to ask you this. Our audience member, Hussein, has picked up that you work on 2 projects simultaneously. What is that like? And how do you manage that, especially because they're a bit different?
So basically, I work on 2 experiments that both are actually dedicated to R&D for NEXO. NEXO is a future experiment looking for neutrino stable beta decay. So the one experiment is right now at Carleton, so which involve all my lab stuff to finish, and the other one is at the McGill. So that experiment is like controlled remotely. So whenever we have to take data and operate whatever, we do it remotely, or just have communication with the people at McGill and finish out all the analysis for that. And most of the lab work I do is for the experiment, that's the high voltage experiment for the NIG. So it's 2 separate, but definitely they took, I think it's pretty easy to manage. I won't say like easy, but it's nothing a hustle to manage to, because they are not 2 experimental tasks that I'm doing simultaneously. One is more like remote thing, and the other is definitely on the hands-on. So far, like later on, the experiment at Carleton will be actually expanded to take the other experiment in. So both of the experiment actually linked. Like at Carleton, what we are doing is all the high voltage stuff for Nixo, and also preparing for the phase 2 of the other experiment. So they both are linked, but yeah, it's not that I'm doing lab work for both of them. It's just that one I'm involved with the remotely and also for the analysis, and other one is in the commissioning stage. So like all the lab work and all. Yeah.
That's fantastic, India. Thank you so much for that explanation, as well as a little bit more depth into some of the work that you're doing. It's really phenomenal. I don't see any other questions from our audience members, but I have one that I would love to ask you. Ask all of you. No, remembering when I started my PhD, one of the things that was the most nerve-wracking to me because it was unknown was the comprehensive exam. And so I'm curious if I know that 3 of our 4 committee or panelists have actually completed their comprehensive exams. Another is preparing now for them. And I'm curious if you would like to share about what that experience was like at your university, and you know, maybe that it's not quite as scary as we all think it is, but maybe that's just me.
Okay, I can start with that. So the comprehensive exam at Queen's is slightly different, I'm guessing, from different places. It varies by institution, but at Queen's, basically the comprehensive exam is somebody's going to be your assessor. In my case, it was Professor Aaron Vincent, and you're gonna get a research question, which is by design outside your comfort zone. And then 3 weeks to prepare a presentation, and it's pretty open, sort of how you do go about it, what you choose to talk about. And so you have to give an hour presentation there, and then the committee will ask you questions. And then there's a second presentation right after, basically a plan for your research proposal, a research plan for your PhD, basically. The thing to know about it is that, at least from my experience at Queen's, it's really just a very friendly encounter, a very friendly oral exam with people who want what's best for you, and are going to try to sort of mold you into a future researcher. So the point, for example, of giving you a research topic that is outside your comfort zone is like, as you do more and more projects, like at least for theory, at some point you're going to be like, oh, let's look into this very new thing that no one in the group has looked at before. So you need to be able to, just go ahead for uncharted waters and figure things out. So that's a good opportunity to do that. In my case, if it had been a conventional and a normal exam, I would have failed it because I was pathetically bad at giving talks. No, I mean, I was really bad at it. It's not that I didn't know my stuff, but then that's also what is very helpful about these exams, right? It's like, what the expectation is, you have to be able to give a talk to a science audience who do not, work on exactly the same things you work at. So you should be able to explain what you do to them and not get into the minutiae of calculations and stuff, and instead just present your ideas and communicate cool ideas. So I failed miserably at that, and I did a poor job, but then I got some of the best feedback that I ever got, and it helped me improve my presentation skills a lot. So I don't know how it is at other places. I would say if it's a place where there's a possibility of failing that comprehensive exam, don't go there. I mean, no one should fail you. Like, come on, it's a learning experience, and if there's a possibility of failing, you have to try really hard to fail this exam at Queen's. We're talking not show up and disappear for 3 months and not reply to your emails, kind of. So you'll pass, no matter, at most institutions, you'll just pass. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot of work, but you should treat it as a learning opportunity. And at the end of the day, you'll pass, and it'll just be a memory. But yeah, treat it as a great learning opportunity. And if you have feedback that is not great or something, well, it just tells you what you have to work on. And that's part of the process of molding you into a researcher.
Such sage advice. You are ready for this postdoc. That's great.
Thanks.
So what are the experiences like elsewhere?
I can say what happens on McGill, at least until this year, because next year they're thinking to change it. So at least I did my comprehensive exam within the first year. of my PhD. And it consisted in a 2-day exercise questions, essentially. So you had 2 exams. The first day was short questions so you had to answer 10 problems. You had to do 10 problems, short problems about the topics that you encountered during your undergrad. So classical mechanics, electromagnetism, statistical and thermodynamics, electromagnetism, special relativity, so the basic knowledge. So you have to prepare like doing problems or the exams. And you had the first day 10 questions, and the second day it was long exercises. So you have to choose 4 out of 8, 1 for each topic. So 1 for classical mechanics, 1 for electromagnetism, 1 for quantum, and the other 1 for statistical mechanics. And so you are judged substantially based on the computations and the exercises that you did, but they were really generous. So it is extremely rare to fail the exam, and it usually takes a month to go back and restudy what you already saw during your undergrad. But now they're thinking to change it in a more different way, like Amit said. So based on your research project more than something that you studied during undergrad.
Well, that'll be a change, right? Maybe more aligned with the research direction that you're going in and strengthening that area compared to what else do you know? Right.
Yeah, but usually we do have, at least we don't have a comprehensive exam like Amit said, where you explain like the plan for your PhD and you just talk about your research project, because you usually do that during seminars and journal clubs talk that we do every week or like monthly. So we have a lot of chance to talk and to share our ideas and research with all the professors in the department. So it's kind of nice too. And so this preliminary exam based on exercises or topics was aimed to have a solid background in the classical physics, classical physics topics, in order to have a sort of like common background where everyone can like start with.
That's great. India or Daniel, would either of you like to comment on comprehensive exams?
So at Carleton, it's quite similar to what at the McGill has. It's like a written and oral exam. So you come up like, I remember like I gave exam in 2019, and that year they changed the what should I say, pattern of exam or whatever. So before that, they used to have undergrad courses and the questions related to that. But in 2019, they changed to only grad courses. So for me, it was not that difficult preparing, because like I took 3 courses, the grad courses in fall 2018 when I joined, and took 1 course in winter. And then just after finishing the winter 2019, I had exam in May 2019. So I already have some already like the courses were fresh in my mind. I just need to just go over them. Although the questions were like obviously not easy. They were like, I guess you have to do 3 questions and they give you 5, and you have to choose which subject you want to, and you just like go prepared for those. And it's, I guess, a 6-hour exam, written exam, and you just like do it and submit. And then I guess a week or so later, they take a oral exam, and they do discuss about the questions you did in the written exam and also about the research you're planning to. They ask about the it's basic. It's not about the present. It's not like a presentation, but they do ask about like what's your plans for the research, and also the basic questions related to the project you're involved with, or maybe you're interested. Is it oral exam is more of the equal between the courses and the academics and also the research, but the written exam is basically just the grad courses, the questions related to the grad. I haven't seen, haven't heard anyone failing in this exam. So I think it's you, like when you go, when you know that you have to give exam, you definitely prepare for that. And when you're already in a grad, like now at Carleton, you're already doing those courses. It's better you do as like don't just make a gap between the courses, and that would be my tip, because it was for me, it was easy to prepare because I was just like doing those courses a month ago. I just finished my exam, and then I just after a month I just gave the exam, so the things were more fresh in my mind. And I'm yeah, I think that will be the tip if you're giving exam with the grad courses, and you just like finish your course and then just don't wait a year or another to. I'm only like as you go in like later years of your PhD, it become more difficult to focus on the academic courses or so, because you are so busy with your research project. But in the beginning of the degree, you have plenty of time to prepare. So yeah.
And no matter when you do it, I've found, and through my own experience and what I've seen from supervisors, they only put you up for your comprehensive exam when they know you're ready. So they won't ask you to do it if you're not.
I'm not sure, like I was put in my first year, so.
Well, they knew you were ready and you got it done. So there you go.
Yeah, if it's possible, that I would definitely recommend giving it right away with the courses, because it become more easy. Like once you just take a gap, it become difficult to like remind it, or just like putting things back. Yeah.
Any other comments from our panelists? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, that McGill, it's mandatory to do the exam within the first year. So you have to have special circumstances in order to do it in the second year.
Yeah, very good. Okay.